Okay, so let's start with white's most frequent choice, namely E captures d5, and after this, my recommendation is straightforward. You continue with e4. Okay, white has two choices. The main line start with queen to e2. However, if you play this line below 2000, many white players will outright move the knight somewhere, and I think this is where the big mistakes start, as black can seize the initiative just within the opening stage. Not so surprising, there are some high-profile tricks and traps exist here as well. For example, by far the most popular choice is knight to d4. And as soon as that knight moves, black's move is very obvious. Yup, you capture on d5, attacking that knight. Knight to b3. And now the key move you have to remember is queen to e5. This move stops any d or f pawn movement because then we can simply take it and give white a discover check. So obvious enough, white has to find the other route. And if we just keep looking at the top moves here, for example, knight to c3, we play knight to c6, trying to take out our queenside pieces first. And after bishop to e2, the star move, bishop to d6, which stops white to castle. And trust me, most of the white players get frustrated here because they are not used to this kind of initiative from the black. So they literally lash out with either d3 or d4. In both the case, we are going to take this pawn. And as you can see here, queen captures d3 happened in roughly 150 games, which I'm afraid leads to a completely losing position. Yup, here our first trick occurs. Black can play this very accurate move, knight to b4, which more or less finished the game just within the opening stage. Why? Well, the obvious answer is we are attacking two locations, and after queen to d1, no prize for guessing black's obvious response. Yup, bishop to f5, and that poor c2 pawn can no longer defend it. Well, many games here continue with knight to d4, which looks like defending the pawn as well as attacking the bishop. But it turns out as a great time disaster, as black has this tactical resource. Queen captures d4, sacrificing a queen but winning the piece, as if white take our queen, then after knight captures c2, at the end of the sequence, we are coming out as a complete piece up. So as you can see, if knight moves anywhere, then after queen captures d5, black get a very good game. So queen to e2, what else? Now white is spinning our pawn and also pressurizing it, and accordingly, we need to protect it with knight to f6. Well, we are into one of the most important crossroads of this line, where white has two major alternatives. Number one, knight to c3, and number two, mainline d3. Let's look at first knight to c3, which looks very obvious. Attacking the pawn with multiple times. And rather than defending this pawn and going into the defensive mode, I recommend this very attacking approach. You start with bishop to e7. So now we are threatening the knight, so white response is forced. He has to take on e4. And after this, you simply castle on the king's side. So you can see by sacrificing one pawn, now we are streaming ahead in terms of piece development. And our most important feature is, as the white major pieces are situating on the e file, our rook e8 can create disaster for white in many different variations. Now watch out this, as you are about to witness one of the most high profile trap in this line, where if white continue with d3, which in fact happens in roughly 8,000 games. See how crafty this trap is, as black and white both can continue with top choices as per the database, and yet white fall for it. Isn't that amazing? Just watch out the top moves in the database. First, knight captures d5, bishop to d2, trying to castle. We play rook to e8, allowing white to castle, but after f5, white is losing the piece. Nope, he cannot move the knight. Well, that's the thing here. You may wonder why. So let's start with the most frequent choice, knight to c3. Big blunder, because after knight captures c3, no matter however white recaptures, he is going to lose his queen. If b captures c3, then this is the easiest one. You give this check and nab the white queen. So that's not good. If bishop captures c3, then this time around we have bishop to g5 check. And after the following transaction, knight captures g5, rook captures e2, bishop captures e2, and the move queen captures g5. If you carefully count the material, white has clearly lost his queen for the rook. Probably this one is my favorite trap amongst all Elephant Gambit tricky territory. Well, some of you may say, well, white don't need to play knight to c3 from here. He can also play knight to g3, right? Well, yup, he can. This time around, white is not going to lose his queen, but he is definitely losing a piece after bishop to f6. And funny enough, this queen doesn't have any square to go, so white has to block it. And after that, yup, f4, and black is really enjoying this gambit. Well, some of the greedy white player will continue with c4, defending his d pawn. But this sort of things does not work against our gambit, because again we have a nasty forcing trap here, starting with knight takes e4, queen takes e4, and now obvious move, rook to e8. Well, white has to do something or his queen is a complete goner. So bishop to e2, blocking the e file, what else? And after our bishop to f6, queen to d3 is the obvious choice. Well, black can play queen to e7 and stop white to castle. But I found even the stronger continuation starting with c6. White can't take it as his queen is hanging. So most of the games continue here with castle. But after that, we can simply take on d5, and after c captures d5, the stunner b6. What a move! And guess what? Black has obvious threat, namely bishop to a6 and nabbing this piece. And funny enough, even though white can see it's coming, amazingly he cannot stop it. The best he can do over here is d6, and after our bishop to a6, the big idea is queen to d5. But I found an amazing queen trap line in this variation by going through the following sequence. Bishop takes e2, queen captures a8, bishop takes f1, king takes f1, and now queen captures d6. So as you can see, we have completely taken all the squares from the white camp, and our queen is literally looking at this juicy d3 square, So accordingly, most of the games continue here with d4 preventing our queen intrusion, but that leads to their queen trap after black's wonderful reply, queen to d7. So our planning is very simple. We want to play knight to c6 and get the white queen. And no matter whatever white plays, he cannot prevent it. For example, d5 is one of the accurate choice. But black can play the equally clever move, rook to c8, taking the control of c6. And after bishop to f4 and the move knight to a6, finally we have trapped down the white sweetie. Okay, so that's why by far the most popular choice is knight captures f6, and after bishop takes f6, as you can see I have highlighted by the arrows, white has three major choices. Well, to be honest, frequently whenever I reach this position, most of my opponent continue with this blunder move, namely d3, which in fact, as per the database, played in more than 1500 times. And again, this leads to a trappy territory where black just finished the white in the opening stage. Let's see it. First, you give this check, allowing white what he wants to do, bishop to e3. But at the end, when we take on b2, white position become a complete mess. For example, rook to b1, attacking the bishop. We give this check, and after knight to d2, we can simply take on d5. So not only black has regained all of his material, but now is threatening the a2 pawn. And accordingly, white has continued with rook to b3, counter-attacking the black bishop. And after our queen to a5, doesn't matter however white plays, let's say a3 and g3 are one of the most popular choices. But against all of this, black get the winning combo. So let's see what is the big idea. After any of these moves, let's say a3, we will start with knight to c6. And as you can see, the threat is very obvious, knight to d4 and nabbing the exchange. If you think white can defend this position, just pause the video and find out. You will be amazed how difficult this position is for the white camp. For example, just one of my recent game, my opponent continued with queen to d1. So he clearly want to play bishop to e2 and get out of this mess. But against this, I deliver my home preparation with this fantastic move. Boom! Clearly the queen cannot escape, otherwise the knight on d2 hangs. And in the game he played bishop to e2, which actually by force leads to the position black wants. After bishop takes, queen takes, and the move, yup, knight to d4, and literally white can pack his bag and go home. Well, the second move I want to consider is queen to c4, which can be played by a greedy player. So his idea is he wants to play bishop to e2 and castle. But it is not going to work out, as after our simple rook check, bishop to e2, and now this amazing move sets up a cunning trap, namely b5. If white is fool enough to take this pawn, then after bishop to a6, we are winning the piece at just 10th move of the game. So that is right out of the equation. And after white's obvious choice, queen to d3, we continue our tricky journey with c5. So our goal is to play c4 and dislodge the white queen. So once again, white response is force. He has to take this pawn. But after the following transaction, queen captures d3, pawn captures d3, and the move knight to c6. If you carefully count the material here, white is 2 pawn up. But amazingly enough, if you put this position in any chess engine, it will tell you that white is almost 2 points down. Isn't that amazing? And the conclusion is obvious enough because white king is permanently caught in the center, and as I have highlighted over here, black has some nasty plans which will completely dismantle the whole white position. Last but not least, probably the most important move here is d4, which is in fact recommended by a grandmaster in a current chessable course. So let me show you what's white's idea. After this, I certainly recommend you play queen captures d5, attacking the pawn, and when white plays bishop to e3, you can continue with bishop to g4. In the course, author suggests that white should play h3, and he only considered the move bishop to f5. After that, when white plays c3, he coming out as a clear pawn advantage. But what I suggest here is, you first take this knight, and after queen takes, you play this crafty queen move, queen to e5, which definitely catch unprepared white opponent off guard. It has not been analyzed in any course, so you have every chance to get a good game out of this. First thing, very obvious, white cannot play bishop to d2, as after queen to b6 we are attacking multiple locations. So that's right out of the equation. c3 has been forced here, and now we play this nice move, knight to c6. So our goal is very obvious. As the c3 pawn is pinned, we want to play bishop captures d4 and get our material back. Now if you check this position in database, the top choices are bishop to d3 and castle, which I don't think so give any advantage to white. Let's see why. So the first move I want to consider is a bad move yet frequently played, namely bishop to d2. After this, we continue with rook check, and after bishop to e2, we simply put our queen on the b6 square. The big point is, it doesn't matter however white castle, let's say queenside castle defending on b2, but missing the important tactic, namely bishop captures d4. So if white doesn't capture, then this position is at least equal for black. And if white take it, then after knight captures d4, black will regain his piece back with an extra pawn advantage. So that's why bishop to d2 is a very bad move in this position. Let's see top choices of database. Number 1, bishop to d3. Not impressed. Simple tactic. Bishop captures d4. And after a sample line, castle, bishop takes, queen takes, rook to e8, queen to g3, and after rook a to d8. Not only black has gained his material, but his rook has been centralized. And in terms of practical play, if anyone is slightly better, that is obviously black. Okay, let's check out what happens if white castle on the queen side. Well, this is very easy. You get your pawn back with queen captures a2, and after white's bishop to d3, it is fair to say that game remained the double edge. For example, I can show you a recent game where black continued with knight to e7, and meeting white's aggression of g4 with knight to d5. Okay, g5 is not possible due to knight captures e3. So in the game, white plays queen to f5. And his idea is that after the move g6, he wants to exchange the queen with bishop to b1. And at first sight, this looks attractive, except one problem, that black has a nasty trick in this position, namely knight captures c3, what a move. Now obviously white can't take this knight, as after queen check, white queen hangs on f5. So in the game, white chooses bishop takes a2, but after knight takes, king to b1, pawn takes f5, king takes knight, f captures g4, and h captures g4, the dust is clear, and at the end, black emerge with a clear pawn advantage. So that's all you need to know if your opponent plays knight to c3. Remember this golden plan: you play bishop to e7, sacrificing the e4 pawn so that after we castle, we can exploit the major pieces of white on the e file by playing rook to e8. And as I have shown in this video, even though white has multiple options, he has to really watch out not only some high profile tricks, but some of the great nuances as I have suggested in this video, which at the end gives black a completely entertaining replica.